Wait, what?
Hey everybody, welcome to a conversation on judges. This is part 2.
Deborah.
Yeah.
Let's go, ladies. I get a little nervous saying that when it yeah.
You'll never think of a tent spike again the same way.
Well, look at you changing the vocabulary.
Is
By
it-
the way,
is it
Great
called a
job
tent
there.
What do you use?
Steak.
Steak. That's it.
That's the one.
Same thing.
T-bone.
That's why I said tent spike.
Rachel was texting me earlier this week for out of the blue. She goes, "What'd she say? We could be Deborah in jail." I was like, "What?" She's like, "Sorry, I'm reading from Judges again." I was like, "Why?
Deborah
Why
was
are
never.
we taking?"
Deborah was never in jail. Joke.
I'm leaving.
Judge's sarcasm.
Oh. Okay, what were you gonna ask me?
Is anyone else sick of judges?
What? I like it.
You
No,
Judges
getting rid of me too.
I don't like judges.
Sorry.
It'll
Why?
lead up.
What do you not like about
It's the
it?
same thing over and over.
But like different
Yes.
narrative. Not a different narrative, but like different experience.
It's story time with Greg every Sunday.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Is it because we're talking about women this week?
We're not so. That's not what it's about. That's what I think I have a problem
Is that why?
with Deborah.
You do? That's fine.
It's not about Deborah. That's always
But
the
that's
thing.
how everyone talks about it.
Because it's like the.
Look at even women can do that. That's not what it's about.
Well,
This is a good point.
jail.
Okay, am I not saying her name right?
That's fine. Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Because it's A-E.
Anyway,
How do you say it?
I kept saying jail.
The jail.
Like going to jail?
Stop! You guys are making me so paranoid. I
The J.
have to look up
The J
the.
is actually the sound.
hair.
Stop it!
Care.
Guys,
Care.
this is a nightmare. Oh.
Don't worry. The only thing worse than that is
We'll put
watching this.
that and share it to social media. Kim going,
They're doing a poll.
If you.
Oh, you're right. It is Yale.
Is it?
Yale.
yeah.
It's Yaal. Yale.
I mean, they never pronounce the J's.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the point. I didn't.
The whole world
This
doesn't
week's
pronounce
about
the J.
The J
Next week,
in
Harvard.
The J is like the Spanish double L.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. Because when you ask,
I know.
I think I know. I did know that though. If you're Spanish, I can't probably say anything.
See,
That's wasted time.
Tell me about it. I have a problem.
but those classes were free.
Is that a Taylor Swift song?
You know what? I'm trying to get more into Taylor. Sorry, but I need Swifties out here. Greg's mom. And
I'm glad Scott's mic wasn't muted this whole time.
Oh,
So
that
it's gonna
sound is
sound-
going to be great.
Yeah, maybe.
anyway,
I know.
I'm trying to
Mute
get
it
into
now.
Taylor.
I don't like Taylor. She's the most overrated singer in music.
I do disagree with that, but
I will say,
Who would be
oh
more?
wait,
who
I
would
didn't
be-
mean for this to happen.
Who would
I'm
be
gonna
more over?
Who's the more overrated?
Um,
I'm just wondering.
Name one.
Justin Bieber.
Overrated? Justin
Wait,
Bieber
yes.
actually can sing.
So can Taylor Swift.
I can say the same number of active Twins players and Taylor Swift songs titles.
So one.
None. Like who's an active Twins
That's
player?
not shocking.
I don't think. Nope. I don't know.
Is Ken Herbeck still playing?
Yeah. And then like a Taylor Swift song title.
Joke to me.
I got nothing. I have zero.
That's okay.
And you could play 14 songs and seven of them could be Taylor Swift songs.
You wouldn't
And I
know.
wouldn't necessarily know.
Every Taylor Swift
Is
song.
that Mariah Carey or Taylor Swift?
Oh my gosh.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, similar.
So
You were
judges.
Yeah, so judges.
No, I think
Wait.
I think we judged pretty hard already.
Really well.
So I do think if you, the point of judges is in the repetition, which is kind of hard to sometimes appreciate, especially if you're Greg. But the repeated narrative is to build this perspective of, which is a feeling that I can definitely feel, and I think it's a cultural commonality, is that, listen, we mean it this time, we're going to try harder this time, we've got better people this time, we're going to we're gonna bring it all together this time. We're gonna whatever. And the story of Judges is that, hey, nice try, but you're back to where you started again, And I mean, I think that something that hopefully we can continually process in this is that it points to the need for something to change. Is that meaning the cycle doesn't necessarily stop with, it doesn't stop with relationship with Jesus, but things do change. And I think that's the powerful question. Can you really process? How do you, walking through this process of acknowledging the reality of God and struggle and failure, and then when Jesus is in that picture, how does that change the cycle of this process? And it's very easy to say, well, everything's changed, but really, how does it really change when Christ's relationship with Christ is in the picture?
Exactly. I don't know. Part of me feels like it's one of those things that doesn't really matter if you verbalize it, because what is the real impact?
I mean, that's the question. What is the impact of Christ? Messiah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make that noise. It's
Did
just
I- did that come out? No.
No, I didn't mean to make that noise. I think that's just like, it is overwhelming to think about, because I feel like there's the idea that it is such like a simple answer, or there's just those people that don't think about it that much. I remember there's like, when you think about like the impact of Christ, I'm just like, well, yeah, like it almost feels like that's what was expected. That's what, not that I like deserve or like is a right, but kind of like, it sounds like that was the plan all along. So like, was there much of a say? Is there like, or is it just kind of like going through the motions, which I think is, but then if you think about it too much, then I think it's like really overwhelming of like, I don't deserve anything. And then it's just like, who am I to even be part of this narrative, to be part of Christ's like intention? I don't know.
You bring the macro, which is over so many generations, and then try to bring it to yourself. So there's Abraham, the one who receives the covenant, and then you see the patriarchs, and you see that this promise and covenant, this relationship with God, and God doesn't forsake the covenant, doesn't say that you guys are the worst, I'm out, I give up. There's grace in that, but it doesn't go well. In fact, Genesis and the writings about the patriarchs, it's remarkable that we hold them, I say we, I don't know if we do, but the writings about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are not to elevate them as heroes, even though even like calling them the patriarchs or whatever would be like, oh, Father Abraham.
He had many sons.
Many sons, yeah. It really paints a harsh picture. Like their mugshots are shown. And so there's that, and then it goes to Joseph and to Egypt, and that is another moment of like, all right, so there's God's provision, there's Egypt and being away from the promised land, and this walking away of this. God's blessing exists even outside of this geographic location. They are blessed and they grow in these huge numbers. But it's broken. They get to really into Judges. They get to the promised land. The kingdom is divided up, and now it really spirals, and it's just not going well. Then after this in the macro again, all right, perfect. We're going to have a king now. This hasn't been working out to having God as our king. I mean, that's not really what they verbalized, but they did want a literal human king. That didn't go well. And so I guess the question that I have to continue to ponder in this is that how do I, what changes when I go from all of my efforts, from different directions or seasons in my life? How is it different when I invite Christ into the picture, a Messiah into the picture?
I think the picture I don't like about the Judges is it often feels like it's just like God just sends one person and then they fix the whole thing. And I know that that's the picture of Christ, is that things are fixed. But I also feel like there's a level of like hopelessness if it's just like automatically fixed. I don't know.
I would say though that
There's like a lack of participation.
the point of the narrative as a whole is that it's not that it's fixed. The one here, it wasn't Deborah, it was Yael.
Yale.
Which is so, I love how she was Moses's brother-in-law's wife, who was not an Israelite. This is from when he was in the wilderness. So, who Moses's brother-in-law is a spy, a traitor. He turns them in. He goes, "Hey, they're assembling troops over there," and then, so this traitor's wife, non-Israelite, is the hero, and sure, there's restoration of order and stuff, but like the story of Judges as a whole is that the next verse after Deborah's song is, "And they did evil again," and so I think the recurring point of the story of Judges is that sure, there was a person that was a hero, but how'd that go for you? The next day, again, next generation, next moment, is that the cycle begins again, and so if you read Judges in just one big gulp, if you try to process it as a whole, is that there was great heroic moments in this, but what good did that do? Nothing. That's the point.
Yay.
Which is great because I think it's part of our common now narrative is man, I just got to figure this out. I got to figure out how to do relationships. I got to figure out how to do time and money. If I can figure these things, one or two or three or all of these things out, then it'll be okay. And the narrative says that, sure, man, good job. You figured that out. It's great. Tomorrow. And so.
Yeah, I know the hopelessness of it all is for a purpose, but it really just comes across to me as why even? Why? And that's probably why the next moment is they fall away because they're probably going, what's the point?
Yeah.
But it's just that repeated hopelessness. Just like okay, I can predict what's gonna happen next week.
Yeah, for sure. I think,
and in my own life too. I can predict it. It's fine.
And I think there is a perspective sometimes in evangelicalism or Christianity that says, if you're not a Christian, your life is all hopeless.
Like, what are you doing? What is that for?
And I don't think that that's necessarily fair, real, or true.
Yeah.
But and I don't think that I think there is a degree of hopelessness in definitely people that do follow Christ. It can be, for sure, if you're not immune from that. But in life's ups and downs, what changes when you bring Christ into that picture? And if you say, I don't know, let's work on that for the rest of your life. Because if you want to be a follower of Christ, and I think I do, what's different in the cycles of life with Christ in it as opposed to the cycles of life with Christ not in it?
Like making me think a lot. Like I'm thinking about okay, so kind of following up on okay, so you are out of that rut, right? Like starting a new path that leads into another stinking rut. Like that feels so defeating, and then it's okay, yeah, but I feel like that's part of life, Christian or not, that continues to happen. That cycle still continues to happen a lot of the times in different areas or maybe in a different picture. Mm-hmm. So it can continue to feel defeating if that is the mindset that you allow it to. Because I was even thinking man, I feel like last week when we were talking about ruts, I was just so thinking about yep, this and this and this and this, and it feels so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And then making a hard right and being nope, I'm not gonna do that again. Mm-hmm. And then literally the next day being shoot, I literally said yesterday I wasn't going to do this. And then I freaking did it. And I was so resolute. And then being like, man, God is probably so like disappointed, and just like you literally were out of that yesterday, or so I thought.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, right? I know. I was like, Greg is like, after like, maybe not really though, huh? And I'm like, but thinking like I had such good intention with that.
Yeah.
And I was so sure. And then being like, feeling super heroic. I'm like, look at me go. Like, what the heck just
I
happened?
made the decision.
Yeah, feeling like I made the decision and like I did the hard work. And for 24 hours. But then also just like, thinking of like inviting God back into that and how embarrassing it is to be like, yep, sorry. I thought that we were out of the woods.
Yeah, I feel like those things are only really, you can only really measure those in like extended time hindsight. Because there are things like in my past that I'm like, oh yeah, I stopped doing that, or I started doing that, or this part's better. And I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, really. Like I was just trying over and over again. And there's other things like I want to change that, but like I'm still that, whatever that is, over and over again. And so it's almost like you just have to like keep trying. And I think that's the part of Judges that bothers me. Is like I really identify with the keep trying, but Judges makes it feel hopeless or like something that they can't do. Like it literally seems impossible.
But that's so if this was just a flat spiral, they recognized, worshipped, were followers of God, they forgot, they consequences judge, victory return. If it was just a flat cycle, but the point of the book is that it's getting worse and worse. It's going down. It's eventually when we get to the end and we get to Samson and you just go, this is not working. It's really like there's what will be next? What's the next judge after Samson? And the hope in this is not that all right, with the Messiah, with Jesus, the spiral stops forever. But the thing that does change is that in the spiral, all of a sudden, there's got to be a hope that the end of this is not me finally being down to where I guess I've spiraled down to the worst, and if it's about me having enough resolve to get out of this cycle, eventually I'm going to be this stupid Samson at the bottom. But with Christ in this, the cycle can still happen. Growth, but there's growth in that. But my hope says that with Christ in the picture is that the spiral of it depending on me is not going to lead to a fatal end. It's depending on Christ, and that stands in the barrier of that. Now, again, the beautiful and incredibly complex theology of that is that with Christ, it doesn't mean that we don't fail anymore. But something changes when we introduce Christ into that spiral. And I think that there are lots of very easy answers. We're forgiven. It's true. It's great. Grace, you have perfect relationship with God because of Christ. He intercedes for you. All these things are very easy, but to be able to just say, listen, you recognize the spiral. Do you want Jesus to be in the midst of that spiral? I think so. Then how does that impact or change things? Like, how is that actually changing what's underneath your feet? And if you don't like really ever struggle with that, you're going to find yourself, okay, it just becomes my responsibility.
Yeah. I think people think that the adding Jesus to their life means that the spiral doesn't happen. And I think what Judges is communicating and what I've experienced is that the spiral happens, like no matter who you are. Like we all have a moment where we are at the worst part of whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Rock bottom is a term we use because it's real, right? Like sometimes you got to get to a point, and it may be different for different people, before change happens. Adding Christ doesn't mean that the spiral or rock bottom or those hard moments don't happen. What it means is that there's a path out of it. Yeah, is that there's an option other than living in that. And I think that's what Judges is really about. It's like trying to exaggerate the rock bottom for this entire people group. Like they've got there, and if it was up to them, they would be in that forever.
Yeah, and here in chapters 4 and 5, Deborah's fine, but Jael,
Jail.
the outsider spouse of the betrayer, is the one who like turns the tide, and you think like, wow, like again, think about it metaphorically. Wow, God will use somebody very unlikely, and that's a biblical theme of God using unlikely people. But and Jesus is the ultimate of that. But even when the unlikely happens, and you go to the next narrative, Gideon, Gideon is the ultimate of an unlikely hero. But when you keep going through all those things, where do you find yourself at the end? The next verse, and then they lost sight of God. They did evil in the eyes of the
Is
Lord.
this the Sunday that we go to Menards and get a bunch of tent stakes and hand them out to all the women in church?
I will go do that. I'm on it.
Yuck. We can write.
Ew.
We can burn the verse
Encouragement.
into it.
Oh yeah. Encouragement. I
Are-
don't know. I can't.
Are you aiming for the ear or the temple? What do you got?
I think temple is like initially. No, the ear is softer initially, but I think that this would like do it. I feel like this would be like a slow burn kind of thing. I don't really know. I'm not a doctor.
How long do you think it was?
Oh gosh, my stomach hurt.
And did she stop when it was just in, or did she keep going?
I can't imagine that you have
It
like
says
a
into the ground.
we are not like a calm composure, kind of like mindless. Like, can you imagine the panic of like, oh my gosh, like, ah! I would be like yelling.
It's in the narrative. It says that he was so exhausted from the battle, and so he was
Oh,
just
gosh.
really after I'm sure struggling to stay awake. And he also said, "Please, I am struggling here. If you could just send people away if they come looking for me or for others, because I am so exhausted here." And then just finally falls asleep, and then she goes,
Might as well.
How many though? How many times does she have to hit that thing?
Shut
2.
up.
You think 2?
Yeah.
I think a lot more.
I
than 2.
do feel like a lot more.
I don't think their things were very sharp back then.
And I imagine she was also probably a little bit nervous. Can we talk about the beauty of that for a second?
The beauty of it.
The beauty of it. Of even though she's like the unlikely candidate, she's the hero in the story, about how I doubt that it was just like a super brave, courageous, heroic act. Like, I think a lot of times with, like, I say this a lot, but like with biblical like narrative, it's really hard for me to think of these as like real people, like another human. And so it is just like she just did that. But like all the emotions and like the either anxiety or fear or like nervousness that actually comes with like, am I going to do this right now? Like, was it a split second decision? Did she have like a plan of like, or was it like really just,
I think
I'm just going off of like
Yeah.
instinct here and just like impulse of being like, I'm just going to do it. Like right now is the only time I could do this, right?
I think she was set up as actually a contrast to Deborah, because I think like Deborah is a step in this direction of like they would have been like, okay, at least the woman that God chose is a prophetess and has these qualifications, right? And so that moved people a little bit further, and then you have Yale or whatever her name is. And she's like even more unlikely to be the person that people would of the time would have thought God would use. And so she's like this next step in the story.
You have to put all the complexity in of so what is the ultimate consequence, since Israel apparently is at this point it's obvious that Israel's going to win. And so what is the consequence of being the spouse of the person who will be found out as a betrayer? What's the consequence for her? And so did that nudge her to be the hero in order to spare her own life? But also, whether she did it or not, she's going to lose the provision of a spouse, which was pretty bad because he's going to be found out. That's part of the narrative. And then, so what is the destitute life that's going to come from that, or losing your life because of it? And so again, like there's a degree of it's beautiful, it's noble, and it has large impact. But also the complexity of it is that she was in a lose-lose scenario. because of somebody outside of her what her husband had done.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great.
Yes, I forget Deborah. Just kidding.
Deborah just appears on the scene as it introduces in there's multiple interpretations of that like it says her husband is, but that's a declaration of could be interpreted as she's fiery. She's like the husband of fire, but it could also be interpreted as she was just fiery. And which is cool a bit, but there is no like what was happening culturally that something so uncultural would happen where this lady was set apart as the leader of Israel and everybody was coming to her to settle their disputes. But how great of a leader was she that they were doing so poorly at that moment then too? That's again another part of the complexity.
That's Deborah, Judges Part 2.
Can't wait for Gideon.
Ooh! Yay.